Good morning on this Sunday, September 3rd, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Governor Brian Kemp says no to a special session to investigate Fulton County DA Fani Willis, and also has a warning for members of his own party. Also, a new AJC poll shows Georgia Republicans are standing strong with former President Donald Trump. And cleanup is underway after Hurricane Idalia. Phil, Theron, and Martha are here, and we welcome back Kathy Woolard into the mix. Welcome back. Thanks. Nice to see you. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Former President Donald Trump entered a not guilty plea this week and asked that he not be tried with the other defendants in the 2020 election interference trial. Former President Trump waived his arraignment, and his attorneys say he will not be ready for trial as early as October. Meanwhile, Governor Brian Kemp is not buckling to pressure from members of his own party who are calling for an investigation into Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis.
I haven't seen anything legally that I think she's done. Now listen, politically, I think this has been drug out.
A firm declaration by Governor Brian Kemp as he rejects some Georgia Republicans' push to remove Fulton County DA Fani Willis from office. Republicans like State Senator Colton Moore want to see Willis's office defunded and created a petition aimed at triggering an investigation into her actions, a move the governor says won't be supported by his office.
And in Georgia, we will not be engaging in political theater that only inflames the emotions of the moment.
He added, as long as he's in office, he'll follow the Constitution regardless of who it helps or harms politically.
You have to be very careful when you're in power in government not to abuse that power, because if you do, you set the precedent for the other side using what you did in the future against you.
All right, Kathy, as we welcome you back, we'll start with you. Get your reaction to the governor's warning to his fellow Republicans.
Well, I appreciated the warning, quite frankly, and I wanted to start out really wrestling with Phil, but on this particular instance, I think the governor, exercised good leadership. I mean, we have to protect our democracy, and we can't just be going down these rabbit holes every time somebody doesn't like something that happened. So I appreciate his statement.
There's still a lot of time to wrestle with Phil.
Yeah,
so.
I'm warming up.
Phil.
Well, a couple points. I think let's look to see if this trial is going to shift over to the federal courts. I think that's number one. And number two, I think that the president and Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff, and some of the others that have been indicted are saying, look, this needs to be shifted. And if one gets shifted to the federal courts, a lot of the attorneys who are experts in this area says they would think all of them would be shifted. I do think that Senator Colton Moore, who had called for this special session, I think both the governor and the lieutenant governor were correct. As a constitutional conservative, I think it would be unconstitutional. So we can't spar on this one. But I do think that you do have a DA oversight panel that's going to kick in later this fall. I think that's going to be very important, whether it's Fani Willis, the Fulton DA, or whether it's other DAs. I think that this could be a very active panel.
Theron, talk about this kind of divide that we're seeing happening in the Senate.
You know, as you look at this sort of divide we're having in the Senate, particularly with Republicans, it really is going to be other Republicans like Governor Brian Kemp. And also, we can't leave out Speaker John Burns, who came out in a very aggressive manner this week and said that we're not going to have a special session. So it's going to take other Republicans like Speaker Burns, Governor Kemp, and Lieutenant Governor Jones to really sort of say, hey, enough is enough. But let's put this into context, Laura. I mean, this Senator Moore basically said, and I'm quoting him, he said that if the governor were not to call the special session, his constituents would be fighting in the streets. If Kemp failed to comply, do you want a civil war? I don't want a civil war. I don't want to have to draw my rifle. And I think, to me, that puts it in context of what we're really up against right now, and just not only in Georgia, but in this country, that you have a Republican state senator who felt comfortable enough to make this sort of type of statement and to threaten the governor of the state of Georgia and to imply that if you don't do this, there are going to be constituents who will have to do certain things, have a civil war, and he will have to draw his rifle. I mean, that was very inappropriate, reckless, strong language that was used by a member of this legislature. So I want to compliment the governor and the speaker for coming out against it, but I'm waiting to see what other Republicans will join these two individuals in this cause.
Well, other Republicans have done that. You've got Senator Shelley Eccles and Senator Bo Hatchett, who put out a letter on Monday who very clearly stepped up against that. Shelley Eccles Eccles is getting death threats, okay, and that is inappropriate. Okay, they've all been on the program. Colton Moore is going to be on my program on Tuesday, and we're going to ask him about this, because what this is what bothers me about this is the things you said, but also this is a petition, and he's got a fundraising appeal at the bottom of every one of these. Okay, and that is not separating what your job is as a senator and your job is as, you know, a person that's got to raise money for your particular causes. So look, I'm glad that you mentioned people that aren't in the Senate that talked, and of course Governor Kemp has an 80% approval rating, which basically means anybody who's thinking is in favor of Brian Kemp. So what we see here is a guy that's huffing and puffing and not getting anywhere, and it's just absolutely wrong. But you've got Steve Gooch, you know, Shelley Eccles, Bo Hatchett, but what's also happening is I guess they have access to each other's lists, all right? So Colton Moore is trying to fundraise by reaching out to supporters of Shelley Eccles and Bo Hatchett. So it's just a mess that's overlapping in a way that it shouldn't.
Well, let's talk about some poll numbers, because a new AJC poll out this week shows President Trump has a commanding lead among Republican voters in the state. Trump led the field at 57%. Followed by a distant second, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. So this is one of the first polls that we've really seen after all of the indictments. Martha, I'll take it back to you. It's still so early, but what do you think, if anything, will change this huge swell of support for the former president?
Well, I think it's less and less likely as time goes on that you're going to see a change like that. But I do think the debates do make a difference. They have made a difference. I think that I saw an interview with Tucker Carlson about how the interview with Donald Trump came about on the night of the debate. And, you know, he even said, I expected fully at any time for the former president to say, no, I'm going to the debate instead. I'm not going to do this interview. So he could show up at a debate. So I think that's the only thing. And then these candidates getting out and campaigning. I mean, I think that many of them separated themselves in this last debate, and hopefully people will pay attention. But the longer the time goes on, the harder it is.
Kathy, 84% of the Republicans polled believe that politics played a role in the indictment. But here's a big but. Almost 40% said that they would not vote for a candidate who was convicted of a felony crime.
Yeah, I think those numbers, you know, there's a lot of polling and a lot of questions, and they're all kind of squishy. You know, we've got a long time to go before we see really what the result of this is. But what I saw, some of the things in the poll, was that 14% of the people were undecided. Another 20% would consider voting for somebody else. 40% wouldn't vote for somebody who's convicted. So, you know, it is what it is. It's name recognition, it's audacity, but, you know, it's interesting in and of itself.
And still a long time to go. We've got a lot to talk about with this case, because meanwhile, there was a big win for the two Fulton County election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. A federal judge has issued a default judgment against Rudy Giuliani in a defamation lawsuit filed by them, and ordered him to pay more than $130,000 in attorney's fees. But there's a lot more that could be coming down the pipe.
You know, Lori, I'm so glad you put this on the list, because, you know, it kind of got brushed over with all the other chaotic things that are going on. But let's just talk about what happened here. And I know Kathy's going to have a lot to say too, but you had two poll workers, women who went to work to do their job, and basically their lives were basically ruined. I mean, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss' life have basically, and their kids and their families' lives have been turned upside down because of false claims by Rudy Giuliani. And he wasn't just by himself. I mean, he had other people in that scene you just showed that basically carried out this false narrative, this lie. And these women had to basically go to court, spend legal fees. And I'm so glad that this has finally happened. But this is a classic example when you have a Republican like Rudy Giuliani who was going to do anything he could to lie and try to overturn democracy. And I'm so glad that this judge has ruled in favor of these two women, and I really hope that people really understand that they will spend probably the rest of their lives trying to rebound from what Rudy Giuliani tried to do to them.
Phil.
Well, defamation suits can be tricky. You do have to prove malice, which is very hard to do. And so that protects, like, journalists and everybody else for their free speech rights. You can actually sincerely think something and it's wrong. Now, that night in State Farm Arena, there was a lot of questions. Even Gabe Sterling, the #2 guy at the Secretary of State's office, admitted that they shouldn't have stopped counting that night of the presidential election in 2020. They broke state law, but they kept counting with the journalists gone and with GOP poll watchers gone. So Giuliani and others, rightly or wrongly, thought, hey, there's something funny going on. I don't know to this day, you know, what what really happened, but I know they shouldn't have started counting again. So will Rudy Giuliani ultimately be found with defaming these people? I don't know. I don't know what was going through his mind.
Well, Rudy Giuliani backtracked, Kathy, on what he said about these two election workers.
Yeah, he admitted that he didn't tell the truth when he made these allegations against them. So I think he's just got a big price tag coming, and I hope it's a big one. I think people need to learn you just can't go out and say anything you want to about somebody just because you want to get a headline.
I think it's maybe let's take the example of a newspaper. They make mistakes every day. You should be correcting it. He did, to his credit, correct himself. I made a mistake. Does the court take that into consideration? I don't know.
What was
It's
the damage?
it's the saddest thing of this entire debacle since 2020 is the fall of Rudy Giuliani. I mean, if you look at people, okay, he I think hooked his wagon to President Trump. I think he believed what he was doing, but he went from being America's mayor to he's probably going to be bankrupt as a result of all this. It's very sad. It's very sad.
And I think the difference, real quick, is you can make a claim, as Kathy said, but Phil, let's not act like we didn't see the doubling down, the quadrupling down. I mean, there was another defendant who had to turn herself in, who basically led the charge. I mean, they were attacking these women on social media. They were encouraging Trump supporters to call in and try to get them arrested. I mean, this was an effort. This was an effort to amplify a lie and a narrative. And so it wasn't just, hey, we make the claim and we want to see why they stopped counting votes. No, it was a month after month after month action to try to ruin these women's lives.
He was a lawyer, let's remember. He was trying to fight for his client aggressively, which it blew up in his face,
Okay.
But I mean, we've seen this on all political stripes of aggressive lawyering.
Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, took the stand in his quest to get his case moved to federal court. The judge said if there's no ruling by September 6th, well, Meadows should plan to get arraigned in Fulton County. All eyes are on this one, Phil. Or Martha.
Yeah.
Let me go to Martha.
No, I mean, I think this is part of this, just like it feels like a million things have been filed this week. Mark Meadows is part of it. And you're going to see a lot of this happening, that people want to separate themselves from this.
I think all eyes are on this, Theron,
Yes.
because they want to see if one goes, do the rest follow?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
in the federal court, which has a better jury pool.
Which you point out every week.
Better jury pool for Phil. But no, I mean, I think that it goes back to making sure that the district attorney's office were prepared for these type of rulings, these type of motions, these type of requests to, as she just pointed out, I mean, there's a lot more going to probably happen this week that we got to follow.
And we'll be talking about it. Up next, Hurricane Idalia paid an unfortunate visit to several parts of Georgia as cleanup continues.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Power crews across Georgia working around the clock to get power restored as quickly as possible to customers as Hurricane Idalia brought heavy rain and high winds to parts of South and coastal Georgia. Martha, in preparation, Governor Kemp declared a state of emergency earlier in the week, and he opened up the Emergency Ops Center and then toward the hard-hit areas after the storm. What do you think about the state's response and the locals?
I think the state's response was strong, both in Florida and in Georgia. I think that we had Georgia Power trucks going in positioning in Florida. They were ready in Georgia. Thankfully, the storm wasn't as wide and broad, even though certainly Valdosta got hit very hard, as well as other places, Charleston, other things where we've seen different things. So I thought the response was good and strong, and both governors looked very strong in their positions.
Kathy.
Oh, same here. All I can say is every time there's a hurricane in Florida, we get good weather in Atlanta. So, I'm sorry for the misery it inflicts on people, but it certainly gives us a break up here.
All right. Well, moving on, problems continue to plague the Fulton County Jail. One inmate is dead, 2 injured after a stabbing incident this week. All this after jailers confirmed yet another inmate died while in custody, the 5th within the last month. Investigators say they found Samuel Lawrence's body in his cell just days after he filed a handwritten prison civil rights complaint in federal court. Guys, I know we talk about this, I feel like almost every week, but when is the leadership going to step up and say enough is enough? We're going to have to just put the money in and rebuild a new jail. Phil?
Well, you're asking the right question. Where is the leadership? Where is the spine on the Fulton County Commission? Democrat-controlled commission. The city is controlled by Democrats. Why have they been dragging their their feet for years. This is a disgrace. 5 deaths within the last month. I will say that Commissioner Bob Ellis came out with a plan just the other day that yes, we may have to hike the sales tax. Yes, we're going to have to make some tough decisions, reallocating some money in the Fulton County budget. I don't think you need a property tax increase, although the Democrats will probably want one and probably get one. But they did tell, finally, County Manager Dick Anderson put together a proposal, $1.7 billion for a new jail. So let's move on this.
Darren?
So, look, the long-term solution here is to make sure that the funding is there to build this new jail, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much it costs. I mean, people, while you are sitting in the jail waiting trial, you've been arraigned, you deserve to be in safe, secure conditions. And so I know that the sheriff is doing everything he possibly can to try to get the commission to move. But short term, you're going to see probably an increase in staffing. You're going to see more people who maybe be participating in any sort of illegal activities. The sheriff was able to fire a few people that was basically doing some wrong things. So you got to have a short-term strategy, but also a long-term strategy. And I agree with Phil. The long-term strategy is to build a new jail. But short-term, we got to make sure that this sheriff and the people who work there feel supported. But also, you got to see, you're going to probably see some swift changes, because to have this many inmates die in this jail and have it happening now with all the political stuff that's going on, it's really just unacceptable.
Well, Sheriff Labatt has really made the argument time and time again. I mean, really, all the previous sheriffs have that a new jail is needed. And I think Fulton County has really been looking at this short term, because the longer they wait, the more expensive a new jail will get.
Well, you got to get the new jail, but you also got to fix some processes, obviously, right now. Okay, and just in full disclosure, my husband handles correctional health care for the Hall County Jail. So we deal with correctional facilities on a regular basis. It's something that's got to be done. There's a process out there, and there's got to be better safety for these inmates, and there clearly is a problem there. I mean, 5 in the last month, that's just too much. So 1 is too much. So we've got to make sure that happens. And I think it's not Sheriff Labatt. Right. Sheriff Labatt has been behind this and wanting to make the changes. The Fulton County Commission has got to stand up and finally bite the bullet and do it.
Kathy, you bring a good perspective on this. As a former president of the Atlanta City Council, you've dealt with this issue for years. Yeah. Just your take on this, and where do we go from here?
Well, I kind of agree with what's been said. I was at the Fulton County Commission meeting when the consultants, rolled out their plan and proposal, and everybody lost their minds. I think when they heard the nearly $2 billion price tag, it created a terrible situation. But people have to bite the bullet and get it done. It's just time, move on, do it, know that it's going to cost that much. But to everyone's point, people have a right to be safe. And so we can't just think that that's the solution, because there's got to be a solution inside right now.
Because you can't forget that in a detention center, these folks are awaiting trial. Yeah. Okay, they have not been convicted yet in most cases, and so they still have the rights and privileges that you and I have, and that's why they have to be protected.
Yeah, Martha, I want to emphasize that point. A lot of people don't realize this. I'm told by my sources that probably about 30% of the inmates are unindicted that are sitting there. Some of them have been sitting there for 2 years. If they'd had a trial and were convicted, they would be out. And so I blame DA Fani Willis. I'm sorry, but she has created this backlog and overcrowding. If you're being intellectually honest, you have to agree with that. Judges tell me that they're not doing the murder cases they used to be doing 3 years ago. She's wasted time and money. It all should have been in federal court, whatever side you're on. It never should have been prosecutions of Trump and these others by Fani. It just really hurt us here.
Darren, final word on this.
Well, I think, look, the fact that we all can agree on this panel that we need a new jail, right? But I think, go back to what Martha said, there are some things that are going to be fixed short term. And also, we cannot leave out the mental health aspect of this. We got a lot of people in there at that 30% number. I trust that your sources are correct when they tell you that. But also, I know that you have a lot of people who are mentally ill who need the services that they deserve while they're waiting trial. And then Martha said, look, these are folks who, for whatever reason, whether they've been indicted or haven't been indicted, they deserve to be in a secure and safe. And I have confidence that this commission, let's give them a little bit of credit here. I know several members on that commission, and I think they care deeply about this issue. It's about getting enough votes to basically get a price tag number that they all can agree on in a short term.
And one final short thing is that you have to remember most of these folks are sicker and poorer than the average population because they couldn't make bail. The reason why they're there is because they couldn't make bail. So we've got to be sure we protect them.
Great discussion, folks. Thank you. Up next, the University System of Georgia changes its employee application process when it comes to diversity statements. We'll discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
According to the AJC, the University System of Georgia can no longer require job applicants to submit diversity statements. Now, these are 1 to 2 page statements where applicants describe their understanding of diversity and goals to achieve it. Kathy, your thoughts?
Well, listen, I've been working in this arena for a really long time. I'm not sure that I care one way or the other if the applicants make these statements. What I do care tremendously about is that the university system address its issues with diversity and inclusion and develop plans that are actionable to make sure that our population reflects the population, our universities reflect our population, and that they're successful. All students are successful when they get there. I would also like to say that I'd really like to see the General Assembly focus on things that will have a bigger impact on people than how the university system ought to handle its applications for positions.
Phil.
Well, this definition of diversity has been twisted into like a pretzel over the years by the political left. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled, as we know recently, that race-based admissions are unconstitutional. It ought to be merit. And I think when you're talking about diversity, it's been a dirty little secret that a lot of white students have been discriminated against under these diversity programs. And you get lawsuits in every state of the union, including Georgia. So yes, the university system, all 26 colleges ought to have non-discrimination statements. There should be no discrimination. That is federal law, and that's just morally correct. But I think that when you talk about diversity, I would be in favor of one thing. Let's have a diversity of opinion on our faculties. It's almost solidly liberal in all too many of these institutions.
Farron, after that U.S. Supreme Court ruling, do you anticipate we'll see more policy changes like this one?
Probably, but I think the thing that's really concerning to me, and I've said this before, we're a state that complements diversity, right? We promote ourselves as one of the best places to do business because of our diversity, right? Our diversity in Kennesaw State, our diversity in Georgia State. And really, you look at our historically black colleges and universities. You got all these corporations in the state wanting to give more to HBCUs. And so you can't say, hey, we have a diverse state and we embrace diversity, but then your policies, you're basically taking away an applicant's opportunity to express what they feel about diversity, right? And you know this, right? I went to an HBCU, but many of our students will basically go to a lot of these state schools and some private schools, and this will be the first time they've actually encountered on a daily basis other people other than the race or the friends that they grew up with. So you'll have people who will, for the first time in a long time, be in a room with Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, white Americans, black Americans. And so I just think that these students deserve the opportunity to basically be, of course, looked at on their merit, but to basically say that we're not going to allow them to talk about diversity, to me, I think it's a lack of oversight and it's a lack of vision for this school system to know that as a time that Georgia is becoming more and more diverse, you look at the people who are moving here, the families that are being raised here, you're going to have these folks who you want to keep in state. And if we continue to put policies like this, I'm afraid that these students are going to leave our state because the lack of embracement of a diversity.
I don't care what they say, I care what they do. Okay, and I don't know if y'all have walked around the University of Georgia campus lately when classes are changing. It is a much more wildly diverse place than it was when I went there, when my children went there 15 years ago. The University of Georgia and others have done great strides in reaching out to all kinds of students and to try to be in a fair way bringing more diversity. So I give them an A+ as far as student diversity. They're not there all 100% on the numbers yet, but if you look at where they were and where they are now, and when you've got a student body of 35,000 with tens of, 50,000 applications, it's hard to make those dramatic changes. So I would say they've done a lot of work. Where they have the problem, and I would agree with Phil, is in the professors, and it's not just, I would like more ideological diversity, but we've got, for example, a SPIA school where basically almost every professor is white. You've got a Grady school where almost every professor is white, and I'm not saying, that there's any intentional way against that, but we've got more work to do on all those levels.
All right, we'll leave it there. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Kathy, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, listen, I've got a bunch of losers, as you can imagine, but my main loser for this week is State Rep Misha Maynor, who was a Democrat, became a Republican. She's going to pay the price for that, but when she signed on to the letter that Colton Moore put out, I think she really crossed a line that she didn't sign the letter. Well, it was in the paper, so I'll go with that.
I can't believe the AJC.
I know, but I'm going to still call her a loser anyway for switching parties. The winners are, I wanted to say hi to my friends in the other Georgia that I spent 3 weeks in Tbilisi and the surrounding area. They're watching today because they want to find out more about the other Georgia politics, so hi to them.
Oh, they're in for a treat, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right, Phil?
I'm going to make the Southeastern Legal Foundation my winner. They're based here in Atlanta. I used to be president of that a long time ago, and they have just filed a federal lawsuit against the Records and Archives Administration. They want to get all those 54,000 emails that the president used fake pseudonyms on his email addresses with his sleazy son. What's all that about? I hope we get those records.
All right, Theron.
All right, Governor Kemp, Speaker Burns going to make them a winner, and other Republicans who came out and spoke out against this type of behavior and sort of language from Republicans and against Trump. And also want to make Athens Clarke County Mayor Kelly Gerst and others who signed a letter this week encouraging the state leadership to do more about gun violence in our state.
Great, Marcia?
I'm going to be non-political, and I'm going to make UGA a winner. They got the first game this week, and Ronald Acuna Jr. made history and got married. He was a winner.
It's a great weekend for him.
Great weekend.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you again next week. And Kathy, you're our winner for building trails in Tbilisi.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.